Bonjour, good morning, guten Morgen. Wherever you are, welcome to this year's SD-WAN and SASE Summit. Upperside Conferences have put together an outstanding set of presentations from an excellent list of speakers, and I really look forward to listening to all of these presentations. Unfortunately, we're virtual this year, so I look forward to seeing you in 2021, hopefully back face to face, for some interesting discussions in the corridors of the Paris Congress. But for now, let me kick off things with an SD-WAN tutorial. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carsten Rossenhövel. I'm Managing Director, Co-founder and CTO of EANTC, the European Advanced Networking Test Center. We are an independent test lab based in Berlin in Germany, and we cover tests for manufacturers, for service providers, enterprises and governments. One of our main areas, of course, is SD-WAN testing. We've been keeping ourselves busy with SD-WAN tests for more than 4 years meanwhile. A few of them public, most of them private and not published. In any case, I can talk about our experiences, and that's what I plan to share with you during this tutorial. Beyond SD-WAN, at EANTC we are keeping ourselves busy with quite a range of test programs, among them 5G, 5G Campus, 5G Release 15 standalone and other aspects of Open RAN, for example, 5G deployments in service providers and enterprises. But we're also continuing software-defined networking tests, currently running a NetConf multi-vendor interoperability test while I'm speaking, and network functions virtualization, which is being rolled out with growing success at service providers. Additionally, we are very active in a certification program for next-gen firewalls and other security devices coordinated by NetSec Open. That should be enough for a quick introduction of EANTC. Before we go into the market deployment analytics, let me just remind you of the fundamentals of SD-WAN, which are still true and still up to date. So in SD-WAN there are a couple of basic elements which are always needed. One of them being the SD-WAN edge. So the edge, or typically the customer premises equipment, sits at branch locations or also at hub locations, data centers, and is responsible for forwarding data traffic. Data traffic is then tunneled through different wide area networks, which can be internet, of course, as the cheap option, can be traditional MPLS, VPNs or other type of private networks, and can also be wireless networks, such as LTE or 5G nowadays. These edges are then controlled by an SD-WAN controller, one or more depending on the size of the network. And the controller in turn, sometimes integrated, sometimes separate, depending on the vendor solution, is orchestrated by a service orchestrator. The controller and orchestrator are responsible for steering the SD-WAN edges and are responsible for creating policies, distributing software updates, and all sorts of management activities involving the whole network across multiple edges. Northbound from all of this, of course, there can be OSS applications depending how the solution should be integrated in an existing enterprise network or into a managed service provider network. So these are the basic components. Now you may ask, where is the cloud in this diagram? It's not shown here, but implicitly it's always part of the picture, as a cloud endpoint is also an SD-WAN edge. As a final quick reminder before we get to the 2020 market developments, what were the original business drivers for SD-WAN? They were defined by ONAC as early as 2014. And in these 7 drivers, you can see they are still actually valid and important today. The ability to leverage public and private wide area networks in an active fashion is still important. Zero-touch service provisioning is something that is very actively pursued by vendors, and we'll hear more presentations about this today as well. The unified service orchestration in multi-cloud environments is probably one of the most important driving factors this year. The ability to scale on demand is going to be even more important in the future as enterprises are busily deploying and growing their networks. And the ability to dynamically tailor network services to individual application needs is one of the key differentiators these days, as the SD-WAN offerings are very much differing on how they understand applications, how they manage them, how they view them. The reduction of the cost, of course, is always an interesting and nice to have factor. I'm not sure if it has fully come to life yet. That's not up to me to decide. And the flexible use of multiple different WAN services, back in 2014 we were talking about DSL and LTE, but now we're talking about 5G. And of course the MPLS is still very important, and internet services are the dominant factor. So all of these original key business drivers are still underlying all SD-WAN deployments. Now, what has happened this year so far? First, I think the market is maturing, and this is shown by mergers and acquisitions, reducing the number of manufacturers that are selling. So at one hand there are fewer solutions, on the other hand there are more advanced solutions, and vendors benefit from merging multiple code spaces into a more wide range, more holistic solution in many cases. There are some new market entrants, specifically a handful of firewall vendors who have discovered SD-WAN as an opportunity, and they are expanding their firewall solutions with SD-WAN capabilities. SD-WAN deployments have taken up speed as it was projected in the past years. If you listen back to my tutorials from 2019 or 18, it was projected as it actually happened. So the growth forecasts, they were 40% year over year, were actually fulfilled. We see a market that's in full force, that's actually unfolding and really growing very rapidly. It's almost, I would say, hyped, but the good thing is it's not only a hype anymore. There are really a lot of mature solutions out there available for purchase or available to be deployed as managed services. We will see further market growth in the coming years, and analysts expect a plateau of sales at a high level of almost 5 billion in 2024. One thing that certainly has accelerated is the cloud integration. This was foreseeable, but it was actually fueled by COVID-19. Many employees were working remotely, were working from home, and also the integration of software as a service solutions became more important, and it's actually one of the more complex aspects of SD-WAN. So especially here, it's very important to analyze what are the differentiators in the market, which solution fits a given profile of requirements best. Now, if we look at the SD-WAN market shares, this is always a little bit of a dangerous figure, so don't take it too much for granted, because the numbers are actually shared by the manufacturers interviewed, and some of them count their numbers differently in terms of like what product sales are actually counted into SD-WAN. But nevertheless, we see a tendency here that a larger fraction of the overall market is shared by a smaller number of companies. We see VMware and Cisco still at the top for their small to medium-sized enterprise solutions. For example, we see Versa Networks and Fortinet and Silver Peak following, so three very different vendors with different types of solutions, and then a number of vendors sharing around 5% of market share each. The total market volume global equipment sales is analyzed as $650 million for the second quarter of this year by Omdia. And this covers only the equipment sales. It does not cover the services, managed services. And but it shows a very agile, very much growing market. How is the growth going to continue? Omdia projects that this year we will see 27% growth after 49% last year. As you know, the bigger the market is, the more difficult it is to grow at the same speed. So the speed is definitely going to slow down, but we will see a plateau at around 5 billion annual US dollar equipment sales in 2024. Managed services are not included in this picture, and from other figures gathered by Omdia, let me summarize that around 30% of this volume is on top for overlay managed services, and around 40% on top for connectivity services, according to Omdia. Instead of looking at market share only, Omdia also surveyed enterprises in North America about their awareness of SD-WAN solutions. The awareness is a big important factor because it's the first step of defining RFPs or selecting potential solution providers. So if we look at these responses from 163 enterprises, of which 47 already had SD-WAN deployed, and only responses from these 47%, so around 80 responses, were taken into account for the diagram on the right-hand side. If we look at this diagram, we see that Cisco has the highest awareness, matching the market share. But IBM, Microsoft, Google and AWS are the following entrants here. 3 of them being managed service providers. So that's quite interesting to see that especially in North America, enterprises are very well aware of managed services, and this is likely going to drive the purchase and the decisions of do-it-yourself versus managed services in the future. By the way, from those enterprises who have deployed SD-WAN already, around 1/3 of their users are mobile workers, so they are out every day and always roaming around. And then another third are home office workers, clearly attributed, I think, to COVID-19. And home office workers are defined as those that are not always at home, maybe some days in the office, but they are on and off using the SD-WAN solution from a fixed location. So what are the WAN investment drivers? Now, these enterprises were also asked by Omdia, like, what are the most important factors for you? Why do you actually invest in SD-WAN? And surprisingly or not, the top numbers here are still the fundamental aspects of WAN connectivity: performance, scalability, reliability, and security. So I think it reflects very well that all of us would love to have all this wide range of features from SD-WAN and a wonderful control and all of these additional functions. But when it comes to selecting solutions, of course, a mandatory part is still that they perform well, that they're reliable, and that they are secure. Let us not forget that. I think that's a very important takeaway. Additionally, of course, when vendors want to compete, it's very important that they support a wide range of additional requirements. The cost, interestingly, at least among those enterprises surveyed here, is not the primary concern. Now, another angle is the question, where is SD-WAN going to go in the coming years, and how is it going to mature? And to this end, the Gartner hype cycle is always quite useful. So I've taken this analysis from the Gartner hype cycle for enterprise networking 2019 and 2020. So last year, the hype cycle looked like this. SD-WAN was projected to be mature and to reach a plateau within 2 to 5 years. So you see the light blue circle here around SD-WAN. And this year, as the Gartner experts have actually moved it a little further ahead towards the plateau of productivity, and they have changed the color. So they are saying now it will take less than 2 years for SD-WAN to reach the plateau, which is matching the Omdia research. For the important topic of the Secure Access Service Edge, SASE, which has also made it into the title of the SD-WAN Summit this year, it has been very, very, very early in the innovation trigger phase last year, and now it's moving up quite a lot to the peak of inflated expectations. And I think this term from Gartner always puts it quite in the center of the attention. You know, is SASE going to solve something today? No. Has it a lot of potential? Yes. But how long will it take? Let's look at the color of this little circle. It's dark blue, where Gartner estimates it will take between 5 to 10 years before SASE will reach a plateau. So it's a complex topic, and we'll have to wait a little further for it to be market ready. Another interesting question, which I think is going to be handled by multiple parties and speakers this morning as well, is the universal CPE. Universal CPEs have been around for a while, but they have not been the dominant choice. Now, they have made a leapfrog step ahead from the peak of inflated expectations last year to just coming out of the trough of disillusionment, according to Gartner, this year. So the universal CPE is actually, and I would agree with that, on the way towards becoming a well-shared solution for the service edge. Finally, there is a new topic that made it into the Gartner hype cycle this year, which is the SD branch. And we'll have to see what that actually means. But interestingly, the SD branch has been entered only with a plateau reach estimated at between 2 to 5 years. So it's hopefully going to progress very quickly in the product development cycle. So in summary, SD-WAN is maturing. SASE and UCPE make huge jumps, but they're still years away from the mass deployment. So what do these terms actually mean as part of the tutorial? I can allow myself to introduce them. SASE is actually usually delivered as a service. It is not normally a product, and it's mostly tailored towards branch access and remote worker access. So all of these small branches out there and remote workers that do not have an IT person on site to support them. And the idea for SASE is to integrate SD-WAN with additional functions, most importantly security and cloud services. So the idea is that the remote worker cannot distinguish anymore, is a service provided by a public cloud, by a private cloud, by company headquarters. It will always be secure in any case. That's the idea. To this end, additional functions need to be included, specifically security web gateways, SWGs, and cloud access security brokers, CASBs. So additional functions and acronyms to remember here. In the best case, there should also be zero trust network access, which eliminates perimeter firewall requirements, and it actually moves all of the security to the service layer. Of course, a next-gen firewall at the service edge itself protecting the remote worker's home is also needed. Because of the complexity of this solution, the multi-vendor interoperability has not really emerged here, so typically these SASE solutions are single vendor. The next topic is SD-Branch that we introduced, and SD-Branch is basically sitting on top of SD-WAN. So it is an overarching collection of all the equipment at a branch office. And the question is, is that even reachable? Is it desirable to have everything in one box? Some vendors are thinking that it's possible, and they are actively marketing for now solutions that integrate SD-WAN with the WAN equipment, including the firewall, the WAN access, the router, and the LAN equipment, including switches and wireless access points, into one solution. Again, because of the complexity of all of this, it is typically single vendor. The benefit for SD-Branch in the end will be to further reduce the provisioning and configuration overhead at small branches, ideally, of course, going to zero-touch configuration. There are a few pain points though, one of them being security. The SD-WAN CPE is the only line of defense between the internet and the internal network, so security cannot be compromised at this point. However, there are conflicts of goals with performance, scalability, reliability, and it's not always taken for granted that the best-of-breed security device is also the best-of-breed for all of these other goals. The interesting question is, can everything be deployed in one solution, or is it better to split them up into multiple ones? Or should security functions maybe be centralized at a hub site, but that is at the cost of internet breakout? In some cases, it's also possible to locate security functions at the cloud when the solution is predominantly using SaaS. Another pain point is the WAN equipment at the branch sites. Enterprises love simplicity, so at small branches they would prefer to have only one device. But today, as per the survey from Omdia, you can see there are typically servers, routers, firewalls, Ethernet switches, Wi-Fi access points and other equipment. Is it possible to integrate all of this? Maybe in the future with SD-Branch. Today, not clear. The market is at the tipping point towards a universal CPE, which will integrate some of the functions already into one device. But again, that is one of the important decision criteria that needs to be taken into account carefully. And finally, a pain point, of course, is the cost of growth, complexity and migration. After all of the enhanced services that have been put on top of SD-WAN in the last few years, it's no longer taken for granted that the cost will be reduced by deploying SD-WAN. Originally, it was promised to do so, but today, all of these additional requirements of bandwidth, of additional cloud services, of migration of advanced services, and of course, all of these very strong security concerns are putting an additional burden on top of it. It's very difficult to balance between the cost in terms of OPEX and CAPEX on one hand, and the complexity and wide variety of functions for a deployment of an SD-WAN solution. That is something nobody can answer once and for all. It's something that everybody has to take into account individually when considering to deploy SD-WAN. So, lots of pain points, but there will be hope after the break. We will not have a Q&A session right now. After the break, I will continue with the second part of the tutorial. Thank you.